You be sure and tell us if you get tired.
Oh, I will, but I won't.
We don't want to tire you out.
No, I don't.
This is May 15th, 1987. This is Joe, Todd, and Bernice Jackson, an interview with Shannon Snow Smith in Woodward, Oklahoma. Ma'am, where were you born?
Stafford County, Kansas, Great Bend,
And when's your birthday?
November the 8th,
What year?
1894.
1894. Who was your father?
Price Cobalt.
C-O-B-A-L-T. And your mother?
Now I need to see here. Well, my mother was Alma Cobalt.
Do you know what her maiden name was?
Haught. H-A-U-G-H-T.
H-A-U-G-H-T. Were your parents from Kansas?
Huh?
Were they from Kansas?
They were from West Virginia.
Both of them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What type of work did your father do?
He was just a farmer.
Did he ever say why they moved to Kansas?
Well, I had an aunt, an uncle, that moved to Kansas from West Virginia, and then they all kind of followed them. And however, my mother and father were married in Kansas, and my uncle was Justice of the Peace, and he married them.
What was his name?
John Hogue, H-O-G-E.
H-O-G-E. What year did they move to Kansas?
Oh, now that. He's got a granddaughter named Lord Quinlan. Might have that information for you, but I don't. And I think that he's got a great-grandson that lives here in Woodward. Maybe he could furnish you with that information.
Was now your uncle? You say your uncle moved to Kansas from West Virginia. Was he in the Civil War?
I doubt it, but I never heard him talk about it anyway.
What about your grandfathers? Either of them in the Civil War?
I don't think so. Never heard him say anything about it.
Okay. How long did you live in Kansas?
I came here when I was 8 years old, 1903.
1903. Why did the family move to Oklahoma?
Well, we thought we were just renters in Kansas, so we thought we'd come down here and pile on some land, you know. And so we came down, we didn't find anything. And there were some people who had come here and hadn't proved up their claim rights, and so we contested them. This is a cute story. We contested the man's rights, you know, because he came down and filed, and he went back to Missouri. He came when my father, you know, filed for this claim right. Well, then he had to come down here, and he thought he could come down and sell out to my father. Well, at that time we didn't have much money, and so my father traded him a team and wagon, and mother made him some homemade bread, and my father gave him hay and grain for his horses, and he was a sort of a large man, and so mother gave him some jelly and some butter, and family back home. And my parents lived in the same town. My husband's parents lived in the same town. He lived in North Missouri, Milan, Missouri. So we would go back there once a year to visit them. And one day he come home and he said, Mom, I can give you some shocking news. And I said, what? Well, he said, I met the man that your dad contested his claim rights downtown. He said, he told me quite a story about it. He had a gun and he shot prairie chicken and quail and rabbit and things like that for his meat. He said, I had 35 cents when I left Woodward. And he said, I still had 35 cents when I reached Milan, Missouri. So we told that. He come back and told my father and mother about it,
Mm-hmm.
And so, just think the little things, how much they meant back in those days,
Mm-hmm. As a small girl, what chores did you do in the farm?
Well, my mother had 15 children. She was pregnant most of the time I was at home or had a baby to take care of. And I sort of took over that responsibility, taking care of the little ones. And then I hoed a lot in garden. I pulled broom corn. And I hauled in feed and I chopped maize, shucked corn, and did everything there was. And we milked all the cows. And we walked a mile and a half to school. And then we had a whole bunch in school at the same time. And I remember they would always go, I would always be a little bit late for school because after we'd milk the cows of the morning, and separate our milk and feed the little calves, bucket calves, we call them. Why, we had to get out and do that. And then I'd fix the school lunch after the other children had gone to school. And I was nearly always late. But there was not so wild plums. My mother was good at making plum butter and plum jelly, and that was always good on her homemade bread.
Mm-hmm.
So I would fix a whole bucket of that, pretty big bucket, so that we'd all have a big slab of that for our school lunch,
Mm-hmm. How many kids were in the school?
You mean the whole school?
Yeah.
75 at one time.
How many rooms were in the school?
One.
How did one teacher handle 75 kids?
She did a marvelous job. She turned out some awfully good kids.
Mm-hmm.
We all loved her. She taught there, I think, probably 7 or 8 years.
What was the name of the school?
Prairie View. It's just over the Harper County line, just a mile
Mm-hmm.
from Woodford County.
I was going to ask, you mentioned proving up a claim. What does a person have to do to prove up a claim?
You have to live on it so many months out of each year. You come down and file for the right, And then you had to live on it, and that's what that man hadn't done. He came down with his brother and filed on a claim. His brother just lived a mile east of us, and so he went back home, and he never come back. So my dad, started to file, started to contest his claim rights some way.
What type of house did your father build in the claim?
He built a long 2-bedroom house. And that's what we lived in for about 3 years.
What was it made of?
Oh, it was just made of regular
Lumber?
lumber, yeah. And then when we got our we leased some school land when we first come. And then when we sued this man and we got this other 160 acres, then we had to move our house over on it. And I don't know how many horses it took, to move that house. We had to put it on logs, and take it over there. And then we built 2 more rooms on our house. We had a storm cave.
Did you have to dig a well?
Well, yes,
How
but
did you get
we
water?
could see water our wells were deep out there. There was several people who almost made a business of putting down wells, because they were dug so deep,
Do you remember how deep?
I think our well was something like 120 some feet.
Did they have a machine to dig these wells?
Yeah, they had these augers,
Mhm.
and the team would turn them around, the horses,
Yes.
turn around and bore that hole in the ground.
How big was that auger?
Oh, about that big around,
That'd be what, about a foot
I expect.
across?
Do you remember the trip to Oklahoma?
Uh-huh.
How'd you travel?
We had a nice place we were living in when we lived in Kansas. We had a back porch and had a well under that, and we had a pump on our back porch. So our living conditions changed very much when we come to Oklahoma. But we lived there. This sounds so terrible. On Sunday afternoon about 3 o'clock, the reason we left there that late was because Mother was making a lot of bread. And so she had to wait till she got all her bread ready. But she had scrubbed the house and washed the windows and everything so the house would be clean when we left it. And I had another 10-year-old brother. He had a pony that we called Dan Patch. We drove 21 head of cattle from Great Bend, Kansas, to here, where we are at. And I had another brother who was 6 years old. I'd say nearer 7. He drove a wagon, team and wagon, with farm machinery in it. That was cultivators and discs and all that kind of equipment that they used back in those days. Then my mother drove the old prairie schooner, and we, the children, we weren't too big at that time, there wasn't so many of us either then. And then my father, you never have seen a header barge, have you?
Just photographs.
Well, we had a header barge, and my father loaded up everything in the world we had in that header barge, including a crate of chickens and a crate of hogs, and feed and everything was going to need for them. And our furniture and everything was in that header barge. And I mean, it was piled full. And we started out, and the reason I mentioned about Mother cleaning up the house was Mother said, "Dad, did you get the sifter?" He said, "No, I didn't get the sifter." Now that was what you sifted your flour in, And I was going with him. We went back in the house, and there was a little bit of flour, and chickens and so on, whatever there is in, was then left in the flour after you'd sifted, And he tipped that over and poured that out on the floor. And you know, I went out and told Mother what he'd done, and I know she cried. He was just in such a hurry, you know, because there she had worked so hard to get the house clean, and he did that. I don't know how she reminded him of it lots of times, but I never heard my mother and father ever speak a cross word to one another. Never. And we built an old sod church, which was called the Church of Christ. And we were in the Baptist, they built in a Baptist church, a half a mile from the sod church. And then the Methodists, they met in the schoolhouse, which was another half a mile. So there was 3 churches in a mile of one another.
Was there any cooperation between the churches? Did they ever get together for meetings?
No, they didn't. They had debates, you know, where they had a prominent minister come here and met with a Baptist minister and was debating issues. And when it was over, there was one of the men there, young man, he got awful mad over something, I don't know what, maybe it was communion or something. And he was going to whip that right there in the church. He drew back like that and was going to hit that minister, that Baptist minister. I remember that very well. And that's why I say we fought over religion more than any one thing, I do believe.
Tell me about the trip to Oklahoma. How did you sleep and what kind of meals your mother fixed?
Well, we would stop at noon, and she had a little old top of the stove in this prairie schooner, and she always had a stew or something there cooking while we were traveling. And then she could bake cornbread and make mush, you know, too. And we had these cows we milked. And we ate good all the way down. We ran out of bread before we got here. And we would stop along the way, then we'd see a clean shack somewhere, you know. And Mother would ask them if she'd already make up her biscuit and everything, had them ready. And ask them if she could come in and bake some biscuits. And because our stove didn't have an oven. And so then she'd always need them some of her hot biscuits, which was very good for letting them use her stove. And we got on.
Where'd you sleep?
Some of us about by the old prairie schooner or under it or somewhere. Mother and Dad slept in it and the other ones slept in it. But we ordered each other and it was September and so it wasn't cold. We could sleep out there on the ground.
Having any trouble fording rivers?
No, I remember we didn't have any trouble. I remember I was crossing. We had more trouble getting cattle through than anything.
Tell me about driving the 21 head to Oklahoma.
Well, my little brother, he just stayed there back of us. The cattle was back of us. And he just sat there on that horse and drove those cattle, and the cattle soon learned that they were follow the crew, I guess. And there's the way we come now.
How did you herd them at night?
Well, they were always ready because they'd traveled all day long. And we had bales of hay, and we put the feed out for them. They were ready to lie down and rest, you know.
Did you have a lead steer or a lead heifer or whatever?
Oh, there nearly always is one. They'll, you know, it's usually bull, you know, the herd.
Mm-hmm. So you have any trouble getting the cattle down here?
We had trouble that winter because we had an awful snow that first year we were here. and our cattle got down in the snow, and my dad had to make a sled, and he'd hitch a horse to that sled and go out and maybe get a cow that was down, and couldn't get up and haul her in to where he had a shed, that we could put them in. We never lost any, but that was how we had to take care of them all the time. Because my goodness, our cattle would be, I've seen them just almost buried in snow.
What was the reaction of the people that you stopped at their houses when you were passing through?
Good. That's all you could say was they were just kind, gracious people, willing to help in every way,
Mm-hmm. And how did you know where you were going?
We had my dad had a sister and husband that lived here. And so we came.
I mean, was there a road or a path, or what'd you follow?
Part of the time, it was a path or just a kind of an old trail or something like that. It wasn't much of a road.
But your father generally knew which direction he was going.
Oh yes, we never had any trouble like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
How many days did it take you?
Now that I'm not sure of. I'm just not sure of. I wish I could remember. So many people have asked me that.
Did you have any storms?
No, we never had but one little shower on us all the time we were coming.
Well, that's fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feed the hogs and the chickens while you were on the road?
Well, my dad fixed them little troughs to the side of their crate, where they could get their head out enough to eat it, and he'd pour that in there. And then on the other side, he fixed a place where we could always put water in, where they could get water for the chickens and the hogs.
How big was the crate you had the hogs in?
Oh, not the size of this bed.
About 3 by 6 feet or something?
Yeah, something like that.
How many hogs did you have in the crate?
It just seemed to me like we had 4. Now, they were not big hogs. They were just, maybe weigh 100 pounds or something like that, see.
After you settled in Oklahoma, tell me about doing the chores here, like the laundry, and how'd you do laundry?
We had a washboard. Wash my hands on the washboard.
And how long did it take to do the laundry?
Quite a long time, several hours.
Now, what do you have to do to get ready? We have to draw the water, and how do you heat the water?
In the wintertime, we heated a boiler on our stove. But in the summertime, my dad fixed a place with the rocks around it, where we could heat our water in a big old heavy tub. My grandson has the tub that we heated our water in, Clothes all had to be boiled back in those days.
What kind of soap did you use? What kind of soap did you use?
Homemade soap.
Did you make soap?
I've expect myself, I've made a barrel of soap.
How do you make soap?
Well, you save your butcher, and then you save the rinds, the skin off of your meat, and you render that out and get all the fat out of it you can. And then you get lye, just plain lye, and you sprinkle all around over that and some water on it. And after a while, it just makes itself. It just forms soap. It's a soft kind of soap.
Did you use store-bought lye or homemade lye?
No, we bought our lye. I've seen Mother make it though out of ashes.
How do you make it with an ash hopper, and how do you do that?
Well, they fix it, always save their ashes because they use ashes for fertilizer in a way, around on garden plots and things like that. So we always had a big pile of ashes, and my dad made a little trough like that, and would push that in the pile of ashes, and then they'd pour water in there, and then when the water come through, all of those ashes, why, it would be strong, boy, it'd eject. And so we would use that lots of times if we didn't have a can rye.
How does...
we did that to break, what they call break the water. Our water was hard water, what they called out there.
Any idea how you make lye with wood ashes and water? What process goes on? How does it do it?
Well, you take that water, and then you put it on all those old, we call them cracklings, and I think they call them pork rinds today. You can buy them. And we had to butcher an awful lot of hogs. See, we'd have all those rinds to peel off of them. And sometimes you bring it out of hollow lard. That's all fat, And we might have lard left over that'd be kind of stale, and we'd use that, and you just put your lye in your water and pour it in there and stir it and stir it and stir it, and then you put it out in big old trays, like that, and then it'll harden, and you cut it in squares, for bars.
At butchering time, what was your job in the butchering process?
Scraping the hair off of the hogs.
What did you use to scrape the hair?
A knife.
Explain more fully how you butcher a hog. What do you do?
You cut the throat. You catch them, and with a big gold knife, you cut the throat, and they just walk around, and bleed to death.
Then what do you do?
Then you have a big old barrel of hot water that you had fire under. This old, it was a kind of steel barrel of some kind, like a barrel, I'll say. Great big round thing like that. And you put that hog down there in that water. It's like you see them dressed chickens, haven't you? Well, then that hair comes off easy. You just, you put the hindquarters in first, and then you put the head in, and then you just take those knives and you start scraping, and so you can just get a hog scraped off clean in just a little bit. With all we kids working on it, all we got it done.
What's the next thing you do?
Then you cut it open, and you clean out the whole inside, and then you cut out the ribs, save the heart and the liver, and you've eaten pickled pig feet, haven't you? Or you used to have them with a barrel. No, it's a 20-gallon jar that Mother would put the pig feet in and pick on. And then we cut the their legs off, And the hind legs always made the ham, like you buy today. And the front legs had more fat on them, but they were cured. They had a curing process that they used, And they had what we call the smokehouse. And they built a little fire out there, you know, and let us smoke. And I don't know how many weeks it took, but I know it took a long while to get the meat smoked. Then we would wrap the meat and put it in our caves. And they'd keep there, you know, for months and months.
How did your father cure the hams?
Well, you put them in a salted liquid like, you know, and leave them lay there for, I don't know, a long time. And then you just take them out, and now they have liquid smoke, but you know, back in those days they didn't have it. So then they smoke them.
Do you remember Statehood Day?
Huh?
Do you remember Statehood Day?
No. Now that kind of stuff, we were out there in the country, you know, where people was working all the time. You never had time to discuss things like kids have today, you know. We grew up kind of dumb, I'd say.
So you didn't celebrate like the city folks did?
Mm-mm.
How far was your nearest neighbor?
Oh, probably a half a mile. Tony! Yoo-hoo!
What'd you do for recreation in those days?
Oh, the boys played marble. The girls made rag dolls and played like that. Was there any mail at all, Bertha? Huh? So. And the boys played marbles and baseball. They had lots of teams. We all played.
Did you get together and have dances at people's houses?
Not then, you know. The people come here were sort of old-fashioned Christian people, and they thought it was a sin to dance.
How did you celebrate Christmas in those days?
Oh, we always had a Christmas tree at the church and in our homes, you know, with popcorn and used cranberries and all kinds of stuff like that, you know, to decorate our trees.
What kind of gifts would you get for Christmas?
I'd probably get a new pair of hose. The boys would get socks. Never any toys. We learned to make our own toys.
What kind of gifts would you give your parents for Christmas?
We didn't give them any gifts until we were grown. And kind of on our own. Because there wasn't any money around, you know.
You ever make anything and give to your parents for Christmas?
Well, I made my mother a coat out of an army blanket. She was prouder of it than anything she ever had. And it was really a pretty coat. I got those big brass buttons and put on it, on the cuffs. And
Did you kids believe in Santa Claus?
no, we were never taught. It was
How did you celebrate the 4th of July?
well, after we got older, we would really always come to town, you know, and there'd be a parade and just different things for us. But remember, we was traveling 12 miles over an old sandy road in a wagon with a team. And it was an awfully hard thing to take all the kids we had to town and try to take care of them in town, you know, and look after them. So we didn't do too much going to town, you know,
How many kids were there?
15 of us.
Do you remember World War One?
Yes.
Any of your people have to go to war? Or is that too sad a thing to talk about?
No. There wasn't any of my family that had to go.
How often would you come to town?
All we kids until we were grown come to town maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
And why would your folks come to town? What was the reason?
To buy their groceries. They all had eggs to sell. Everybody kept eggs, you know. Town people bought the country eggs, you know. And then my mother started making butter, and she would sell about, I've known her to mold 100 pounds of butter. She got 20 cents a pound for it. And that's how we bought our groceries, was with our eggs and our butter.
Did you have meatless and wheatless days during World War One?
Have what?
Meatless and wheatless days? Do you remember?
Well, you know, flour was hard to buy for a while, you know. And so we had a great big old feed grinder that the horses pulled it around and ground feed, you know. And and after we grind feed for our stock, and then Mother would go out and put a clean sheet down under that, you know. And then we would grind corn for our meal, and grind wheat for our cereal and things like that, you know. We used lots of moistened milk and lots of cornbread and things like that. We ate well. We were never hungry.
Always liked cornbread and milk. I never did get tired of it.
And then Mother, we always had a big garden, and Mother just canned everything in the world that she could find to can, and then we raised a garden that you just couldn't imagine the material that came out, the food that was raised in that garden, and how we took care of it through the winter. My dad would dig a great long ditch, and then he would put straw in it, you know. The ditch was probably 3 foot deep, and he'd put straw in that, and then maybe put cabbage here, a load of cabbage, I mean a wagon load of cabbage. And there would be a wagon load of potatoes, sweet potatoes, apples, because we put out, we had an orchard, you know, and had our own fruit right away. And then he'd cover that with straw, and then cover it with dirt and heap it up. And then he'd put the stake, you know, to show where you could get your apples and your turnips and everything that we raised, you know. And that's what we lived on in the winter time. See, we didn't buy any groceries hardly. Sugar and coffee and salt and flour and things like that.
Well, that was the healthful way of living too.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Did you go to high school?
No, I never got to go to high school. I finished the 8th grade, you know, and
Do you remember the flu epidemic in
Yes.
1919?
yes.
Did you folks have it?
Uh-huh. But now that was after I was married.
Oh,
What's your husband's name?
Richard Smith, everybody called him Dick.
And you were married, what year?
19 and 15.
1915. Did your husband, you say your husband didn't have to go to the war?
No.
1917, 1918?
No.
Was your husband a farmer also?
Yeah, and a trader. He bought cattle, you know, and shipped them to Wichita and Kansas City, things like that. People would have a surplus, you know, and he'd go around and pick them up and then drive them into the closest town where we were at, was, you know, and load them on a train and send them up there, and he'd go with them.
he covered quite a territory then.
Yes, he did.
Was he ever out in Beaver County buying cattle?
No, he never went out that way. It was usually just in Harper and Woodward County.
Well, I imagine he made good at it.
Yes, he made good. He could look at a cow and tell how much she's going to weigh and how much she'd bring on the market, things like that. He was a good judge of cattle.
I'm going to turn this on. I think you're getting tired.
Yes,
Okay.
well. No, I married and had 4 sons, a pair of identical twins. And I just have 1 son left out of the 4.
Did you live on a farm, you and your husband?
Yes.
How far from your
Ranch.
home did you?
Half a mile.
Just a half mile. You didn't move very far.
I was in love with my husband from the time I was 10 years old because he was older than I. And I was in love with him when I was a little girl. I thought he was a nice guy. And then he always said that he just never married. He just waited for me to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
We had a good life together.
How did the Depression affect you and your family, the 1930s?
Just about as bad as you could ever imagine anything. We lost quite a lot of our land. As soon as we'd get a quarter of land paid for, we'd mortgage it and buy another one until we accumulated about 3,000 acres of land.
Where did your father's family come from originally, the Cobalts?
Now that, I don't know, they were just the whole clan as far as I knew, because I knew my grandfather. And that's as far back.
What was his name?
Joshua Cobalt.
Are you relative to the Cobalts that lives here in Woodward now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you are.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be a Cobalt that worked at the Historical Society.
There is?
There was.
Oh.
Well, she married Tom Cobalt from West Texas.
No, I didn't know. Yeah.
Are these your nephews that lives here?
No, they would be cousins.
Cousins.
Did you do any work for the war effort in World War I? Like some women knitted and some wrapped bandages?
No, I'll tell you, I never had time because we had range hands that had to be cooked for. I had 4 little boys. I'll tell you what, I had 4 children under 3 years old. My oldest little boy wasn't quite 4 years old, quite 3 years old. And when my twins were born, and I had Jim and Cecil, Bobby and Billy. And I had all that I could do every day when I got up. I wondered if I'd be able to get everything done I had to do. And the ranch hands, the guys who come in here from somewhere else, I had to wash for them. And I was doing my washing on a washboard. And we had to raise out of hogs, and I would raise the runny pigs, you know, take care of them and feed them and sell them, and I'd always save my money because I had some place I wanted to put it. And I bought my first Maytag washing machine, the pigs I sold. And then I put in a Delco system out there, you know, for nights. And I paid for that with my low-rent calves that was going to die if I hadn't taken them over. And everything that I could, I'd always save my money in there. I had enough so I could do some big thing with it, you know.
Do you remember the dirt storms?
About dust,
The
Our
dirt
dust-
storms?
our dust days, I'll say I do.
About Black Sunday.
Listen, that was just, there was dust storms. Have you ever lived in Oklahoma?
Oh, yes. I was born and raised out in Beaver County. So I know
When did you move to Woodward?
3 years ago.
You might have known my niece, Mrs. Russell Smiley.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
She's my niece.
Yeah.
My youngest sister, she has heart trouble and emphysema, and she's taking care of her mother now.
Well,
She's out to Beaver.
yeah, she lives in Beaver, doesn't she?
Mhm.
Miss Smiley does.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I know her. Okay, how did you keep the dust out of your house?
That was impossible to do. You had to dust every day, or maybe twice a day or something. You go to set the table, you had to wash the table off before you could set the table, you know.
Did anybody have any dust pneumonia?
Yes, we heard of that.
I lost one of my best friends with dust pneumonia.
You did.
Well, let's go on to World War II.
One of my sons was in World War II, but he spent most of his time here. He was sent overseas for a little while, but he never was in any danger anywhere.
Well, that was lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Where was he sent, do you remember?
That has just left me. But somewhere over Island.
I'm afraid you're getting tired.
Oh,
Tell
go
us.
ahead. Anything else you want to ask me? Go ahead.
Aren't you getting tired?
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
What did Woodward look like in the early days?
Oh, the first streets we ever had was made out of lumber.
They were.
Mm-hmm.
How'd they lay the lumber down so it'd stay? What'd they do?
Oh, they'd build 2x6s, I think they were, and then just made a cut the saw the wood, you know, just ran across there about about as wide as a door, you know, just the stores, put in stores, then they'd always put in these streets, you know.
Now, were these the streets or the sidewalks?
That was a sidewalk.
Sidewalk.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What about the streets?
Oh, that wasn't done until years and years later.
How bad were the streets when it rained?
Muddy.
How'd you cross them?
Well, you always had a team and wagon. We got our first car in 1917.
What was it?
An old Ford touring car.
Model T?
Yes.
That was my first car to ride
Mhm.
into.
Yeah.
How did it get over the sandy roads? Did you have to get out
Oh,
and
we'd all
help
have to get out and preach it on them.
Did you learn to drive?
Yes, I just sneak around and learn to drive out in the pasture.
Oh. Then you could go any place you wanted to
Mhm.
without your husband.
Yes. I didn't do much going. I went to church. And then we had a home demonstration club, and all the women participated in that. Not as much going as we did.
Mhm.
Oh, we'd visit the neighbors. You know, we had wonderful neighbors. Really. Just, I said there never was a community anywhere that I ever knew of that where the children grew up, caused trouble and things like that. We never had that out there. All of them were just fine people, you know, and never heard of divorce. I didn't even know when I began to hear about a man and woman divorce. We didn't have it out there where we lived. Well, I didn't know what divorce was. I can remember that. And I remember asking Mother, well, what is divorce? And she told me that it was when a man and woman decided not to live together anymore.
Now, you said that you have an infection of the lungs.
Uh-huh.
What's that called?
What's the name of that again?
Oh. Pneumonitis.
Pneumonitis.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a fairly rare disease?
I think it is. My doctor told me that it affects the elderly, I think. And he has a sister that has it, and she's up in her 80s.
How did it start?
It starts with just an infection. You just start coughing up. Just coughing up. It just looks like pure old pus. And oh, you just cough it up until you just wonder how in the world. And then they give me antibiotics, which I'm allergic to dry it up. And now I'm not coughing. But they nearly cooked me with antibiotics. I tell you, that burns me and itches. Those antibiotics, you have no idea. I told my doctor, I said, you know what? I come out of that feeling like a fried piece of bacon. Oh, it just affects me so deeply, but He said, well, it's the only thing we can do to relieve you. But I won't ever again take it for 7 days. I took it 5 days this last time. I said then I wouldn't never take it again. I said, what's the use in prolonging this? That's where the place I've reached now, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Why doctor it? Why not let me go on? I'm ready, you know.
Now you said the infection spreads from the lungs?
It just affects you, you know. It'll probably hit my right lung next, you know. But it just, you just cough until you're so weak. And you just keep coughing this up, you know. There's no end to what you cough up. And then when they give you these antibiotics, but then that stops that, you know, for a while. And then it'll start up again, you know. I never heard of it until it struck me.
Who's your doctor?
He might not want his name used, I'm afraid.
Oh,
I'd rather not, I don't mind telling you, but I'd rather not.
I see.
Okay.
Doctor here in Woodward?
Uh-huh. Dr. Whiteneck.
Oh, I've heard he's a good doctor.
He is. He's doctored me for 20-some years, so he knows me better than any other doctor.
When did you move to Woodward?
1943.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I hurt my knee. I was out shocking feed. We had a binder, you know, and we had her feeding bundles, and we had it all down, and I was out in the field shocking feed, and my neighbor lady had a whole family of children, and her 2 older kids were big enough that we'd put them in shocks, you know, we'd pick up those bundles, you know, and put them in shocks to keep them, you know, so that, and we'd been having some rain, and so my son and this neighbor woman, you know, 2 children, was helping over there in the field. It was a mile and a half from, she just moved across the road from me. And she had 9 children. And I looked across and seen their house was on fire. And she left a little girl in charge of the children. Just had a lot of little kids. And I whirled around and twisted my knee and I broke the cartilage between my knees. Now that's what I'm suffering with now.
Mm-hmm.
My knee is just so painful I can't hardly. I'm on a heat pad all the time and have to take pain pills, or I just couldn't step it. That
Or
pain.
did they save the children?
Yes, and I started to whirl to go and get in the pickup, and she's down in the field south of me quite a ways. But I was kind of up on the hill, and I couldn't get the pickup started. So then I called to her and waved, you know, to look that way, and so she seen them what it was. So she and my son, they tore up just through the field. I told him I couldn't start the pickup. And so I wondered how in the world I was just, my knee was just killing me nearly. And so I come down along the fence, and I was kind of holding to the fence and the fence post and so on, you know, just a crippling along. And I found an old forked post, you know, like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I took off my pants and put between that, and then I used that for a crutch.
Well,
And I walked a mile and a half.
well.
And this little girl, she was probably 10 years old. She got all of them out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
One of their brothers was kind of semi-retarded, and he went and poured some gasoline in the stove on fire, you know, and it just all went like that. And she got them all outside and had them all in the corner of the yard by the time they got there. So it was kind of a bad deal.
When did you lose your husband?
He's 61, must be. Yeah. Anyway, he's been gone 26 years, so now what year was that?
61, 70, about 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
26 years.
Well, I think we have a good interview.
Okay.
I want to thank you.
I've enjoyed this.
You have.
I really have.
Well, I've kind of enjoyed going back
Yes,
through the
I do
years.
too. Because I lived through just about what you did.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we sure thank you, and
You can
And
turn
this
the fan
tape-
on.
this tape that I made will go up here in the museum.
Okay. I said I did want to change the name. I have a little great grandmother and she's a little honey.
Well, you know Black Sunday, that Black Sunday, and there was a family out there by Laverne by the name of O'Hare, and they had a baby born that day, and they named him Dusty Weather. Oh, and